Hey everybody, it's Party Elite here with a quick review of the new Total War 3 Kingdoms DLC, Mandate of Heaven. Before I dive in, I want to give a quick thank you to Creative Assembly for giving me a review key to the DLC so I could spend some time with it before preparing a review. I'd also like to mention that if after watching this review, you're interested in picking the DLC up, you might want to consider doing so at the Humble Bundle affiliate link under the I at the top right corner of the screen or in the description down below. Doing so helps support the channel as well as charity. Without further ado, let's dive in. The Mandate of Heaven DLC takes us back in time to a pre-Three Kingdoms era. It shows us the backdrop against which the Yellow Turban Rebellion came to be, and it directly leads into the events of the Three Kingdoms period, with Dong Zhuo's treachery, the fall of the Han, and the war to reunite China. In fact, with the DLC, you can play through the entire thing as any one warlord. With it, we're getting 6 new playable warlords, including 3 Han factions and 3 factions that represent the Yellow Turban Rebellion. Beyond that, however, is the interesting option to play as base game factions in this earlier timeline. It's a relatively different geopolitical situation, and this just brings an extended gameplay start date that you can use with old favorites like Cao Cao, Liu Bei, a less thick Dong Zhuo, or whoever else catches your fancy. Unfortunately, there's no slider to choose start dates, so some warlords cannot be selected, though they will show up partway through your playthroughs as a result of events. Notably, Kong Rong and Yuan Shao both leave the employ of the Emperor, and if you're playing as the Emperor, you have some decisions to make when events like these come up. I do wish Creative Assembly had implemented a slider-like system similar to Paradox games like Europa Universalis 4, allowing us to pick exactly when along the timeline we decide to dive in. This would unlock more starting options, but it's not really a deal breaker, just a nice, cherry on top of the icing. It'd be a nicer way to implement what is otherwise an interesting idea of these different chapters. With the new warlords come new faction mechanics, and these mechanics are all interesting in their own right. If you're playing as the Emperor, for example, you have to balance the controlling powers in the court. The bureaucrats control your court at the start of your campaign, and you have to shift the balance and spread it across your warlords and dynasty instead, unlocking buffs and reducing the debuffs from the heavy bureaucratic influence. You also start with a very serious financial situation, a lot of money in the bank, but very quickly depleting. A quick way to solve these problems is to fire some of the bureaucrats that are plaguing your court, but that's when the next element comes into play. Your political influence, which is a new currency that needs to be used to fire court members but can also be saved for other diplomatic actions like annexing imperial lands. There's this really interesting balancing act going on because as you fire bureaucrats, if they're the eunuchs, they're actually going to take some food production with them because eunuchs help you produce food. And yet they're also bureaucrats, so you want to fire them, but you have to balance your food income. At the same time, some of the people in your court cannot be deployed in armies, so they're an easy, option to fire, but they have other benefits that they come with as well. So I really like how the balancing of the court has played a bigger part here than it ever did before in Three Kingdoms. As the Emperor, there is no faction level ladder to climb here either. Luo Chong, meanwhile, he focuses around his trophy cabinet and the Fortitude Bar. The Fortitude Bar isn't all that special per se. Win battles to fill the bar to gain better benefits. It's very standard affair. The Trophy Cabinet is a bit more interesting, unlocking new options as you perform various tasks, allowing you to select up to 4 trophies to stack various benefits. Ranging from bonus experience to morale buffs to damage or firing rate buffs, among various other things, the Trophy Cabinet is a nice way to customize faction-wide buffs to fit your playstyle and current situation. The idea falls a little short in that there are no negatives to any of the trophies, and so it's really just a matter of picking which buffs you prefer without having to worry about any negatives or any consequences, and so that feels a little dull if I'm completely honest. Whether adding trophies to your cabinet cause, public order issues as the starving people of China watch you embellish your fancy cabinet, or perhaps something as minimal as an upkeep cost for keeping them in mint condition, absolutely any negative would be nice to see, as right now it's a very, unlock it, set it, and forget it kind of situation. The debuffs could also have been directly related. For example, higher missile block chances come with slightly reduced speed, or extra ammo for archers comes with slightly higher upkeep costs. It would make for more interesting decision-making as far as gameplay is concerned. And it's not that the benefits have to be outweighed by the negatives, but there should be some sense of decision-making here. Lu Di, similarly, has the Great Library. He unlocks tomes by accomplishing various tasks, and then he can pick 5 to assign to the Great Library, reaping various faction-wide benefits. This suffers from the same issue as the trophies. There are no shortcomings to any assignments, so even though there might occasionally be the compulsion to change things up, it never really feels like a necessity. And sure, it might sound a little strange to punish a player with what is essentially the reward for completing a task, but again, I'm not talking about punishment, I'm talking about balance. If trophy or library combinations are supposed to synergize with specific playstyles, then they should actively work against the opposing playstyle. I shouldn't reap the benefits of doubling artillery ammunition and also increasing their range damage without paying for those benefits by sacrificing other unit types' strengths. I shouldn't be able to increase income from commerce and industry without suffering, say, perhaps increased corruption. Anyway, I've rambled enough about this. It's not a bad set of systems, they just fall kind of flat. They don't push far enough or hard enough to actually create compelling decision-making situations beyond which buff do I want right now. The Yellow Turban factions, meanwhile, are very different. Starting with no land, looking to make a mark for the rebellion before the Mandate War kicks off, their zeal is a unique feature that ties the 3 brothers of the rebellion together. Unfortunately, zeal is just a bar that fills and decays like other bars, each of the Jiang brothers using a different method to refill the bar, and each gaining a different set of benefits from it being more or less full. These benefits obviously play into each of the brothers' personal playstyles. The Yellow Turban Rebellion reform trees are quite nice though. They are completely different from the base game, and they're actually sufficiently complicated as well this time around, with each of the brothers starting with a head start in a specific branch that suits them best. There are a plethora of choices set against beautiful illustrations, and it genuinely feels like a tech tree worth exploring, one that forces you to pick and choose depending on evolving circumstances. You know, the best kind of tech tree. And finally, of course, we also see the addition of a bunch of new units, all beautifully crafted and rendered, alongside more events, more decisions, and more unique characters as well, for both sides of the Mandate War, and other warlords as well, in fact. Now, there are some overlapping elements as well, mechanically speaking. All factions have to deal with fervor. Yellow Turban Rebellion factions spread fervor, causing unrest in Imperial lands, and so Imperial factions must build buildings or use assignments to counter it, otherwise they'll see rebellions pop up. All courts, aside from the Emperors, are the same as the base game, and all factions, aside from the Emperor, have to climb the faction rank ladder. This last one, at the very least, is a good thing in my opinion, as playing as the Emperor has got to be one of the shorter Total War campaigns I've played. In all honesty, the Mandate War is very much skewed in favor of Imperial forces, and since the AI is relentlessly aggressive, playing as the Imperial factions gives you an easy win in the Mandate War, while playing as the Yellow Turban Rebellion factions is significantly more challenging. This makes sense, of course. The rebellion was crushed, historically speaking, but from a gameplay perspective, it feels a little tame and timid. Winning this all-important war as an Imperial faction doesn't feel so grand, and once I finished a playthrough as the Emperor and, the rebellion was crushed, mainly because of my allies' work, in fact, I couldn't help but feel like the victory was a little hollow, and it's hard to feel motivated to continue onwards. I wish things like Dong Zhuo's defection or, other elements causing issues to the Empire at the time played a bigger role and were a key part of the core win condition of the faction. Now, I wish the DLC also pushed things a little further, mechanically and numerically speaking, when it comes to the beginning of the rebellion. The nation was struck by horrible famine. People were dying left, right, and center. It was not a good time. Unrest was a serious issue, and corruption was a major problem too. None of this is really represented in the game, though. Sure, food isn't as plentiful as in the base game, and you'll see that quickly enough when you try to trade it. Everyone's sort of, poor or very poor as far as food is concerned. But we're still seeing full stacks of armies marching around, not a care in the world. Populations are decent enough to sustain replenishment as well, and public order is really a non-issue despite the reality of the situation. Fervor doesn't do enough for the Yellow Turban Rebellion to cause an issue for the Imperial forces. At least that's how I felt. Now, maybe I'm just looking for a more punishing situation for both sides of the Mandate War, but I feel like this is a key way in which the DLC kind of falls short. It doesn't quite feel like the dire straits are dire enough. Then again, I'm no historian, and maybe my assessment of what was going on at the time is way off base, and it turns out that it was actually great times for China, but based on what I know and what I've read, it was a terrible time. No one was having fun, except for, maybe the eunuchs, and I feel like that doesn't really come across in this DLC. Now, as many of you know, I avoid using numerical scores for my reviews. I think they're arbitrary, and they lead to arbitrary comparisons between games that make no sense. Instead, I look to fun factor, and with the Mandate of Heaven DLC, this is an easy topic to tackle. If you enjoyed the base game, you should definitely get the DLC. It's more of the same turn-based empire building and real-time battle fighting that you know and love. It adds lots of new units and a fair number of new mechanics that are good as well. I just think they could be pushed a little further to present more of a challenge. It also adds new factions, while also adding a new start date for pre-existing factions, which is again a neat way to extend the campaign playtime into a different geopolitical space and situation. And this is all just for $10. I wish the Yellow Turban Rebellion got some more attention with special mechanics like the trophies and the Great Library, and I wish the trophies and the Great Library themselves were a bit more fleshed out. But despite that, I would say that this DLC is much better than 8 Princes, and definitely better than the Yellow Turban Rebellion DLC that the game launched with. With that said, I still feel like the Yellow Turban Rebellion gets the short end of the stick. No family mechanics, no spying. There should have been some substitutes. It just feels like they don't have enough new stuff to do that sets them apart from the base factions, apart from, I guess the best way to put it is, what sets the Yellow Turban Rebellion apart in some ways are the things they can't do, as opposed to different things they can do, if that makes sense. Now, if you simply don't care for the new factions you can play as, then the DLC can wait, of course, but if you're looking to add some extra playtime to a game you enjoy, this is a quick and easy way to do it. The new units are fun to play with, the new Warlords are fun to play as, and the new start date feels intertwined enough with the base game that it all feels like one giant epic story waiting to be rewritten by you. I hope this review gave some insight into the Mandate of Heaven DLC for 3 Kingdoms. I tried to keep this one shorter than usual, so please let me know your thoughts down below. As I mentioned before, I'll leave an affiliate link down in the description if you'd like to pick it up while supporting the channel and charity. And as always, a massive thanks goes out to all of my channel members and patrons for supporting the channel and keeping it alive and running smoothly. And of course, big ol' thanks goes out to each and every one of you for watching. Until next time, cheers.